here to provide an update on the company. It's been a big quarter, lots of important changes, in particular around met test work and processing. So I'll let Julian put a presentation on the screen and we'll go through it.
Thank you very much, Gigi, and thank you for everyone that's taken the time to join us here. I'll just quickly share my screen.
I'll also interject that we've got a few questions that were submitted before the webinar that we'll go through at the end. If you did want to ask a question, please feel free to use the function, the question box function.
Okay, everyone should see the cover slide here for Viking Mines, securing America's tungsten future and our high-grade past-producing assets in Nevada, USA. I'm really pleased to be able to give an update. We've had a huge amount of activity that's been taking place since we announced the transaction to acquire these projects back in December. And just for a bit of an overview, the picture here on the front is of the Linka project, which is the flagship project within the portfolio that we have in Nevada. And we're looking to the south over the Conquest mine in the foreground through to Linka, the namesake for the project, the Linka mine in the background, and the old mill site on the right. So the usual disclaimers and competent person statements here. Take the opportunity to read those at your leisure. There's a version that's been released on the ASX today. So just running off with the investment highlights. As I mentioned, we've got USA Tungsten with the flagship Linka project. This is high-grade, past-producing tungsten asset, which we're advancing rapidly towards maiden drilling, that we are working towards commencing with that drilling later this quarter. We've had robust project performance take place over the last few months. Since we initially went out and undertook our original due diligence sampling, we collected several hundred kilograms of material from stockpiles that are at the site, and we've been embarking on a comprehensive metallurgical test work program. And I'm very pleased to report, and those that have been following the story, that we've managed to achieve a 63.6% gravity concentrate, which is part of the processing step that we're looking to employ. And I'll run through more details on the metallurgy later. We've also seen high-grade surface sampling. This included a rock chip in excess of 14% WO3, which is exceptionally high grade. And the project itself has an average historical mine grade of 0.5%. We've completed fairly extensive ground geophysics, which incorporated magnetics and gravity, and that has helped establish the potential scale and opportunity of the project. And I'll expand on that a bit later in another slide. We've got extensive work programs both underway and planned. Recently, we announced we completed a tailings dam sampling program, looking to see what potential material could be left in the tails from the mining that took place 75 years ago in the 1950s, and stockpile sampling as well. The assessment of both the tailings and the stockpiles are currently underway while we wait for assays, and when we get those assays through, we'll be able to complete those assessments and ascertain their potential value. I've touched on the metallurgy, but in parallel with the metallurgy, we have a conceptual processing study ongoing with our partner Mineral Technologies, and they're helping us define a conceptual process flow sheet, which we look to use to get CapEx estimates for the project. And this is all coming together with maiden drilling, which is scheduled for, as I mentioned, later this quarter. In parallel, the market dynamics couldn't be better for tungsten. We're all-time highs, trading at USD $3,050 per MTU. That's a metric ton unit. That's 10 kilos. And that's been a 10 times rise since the start of 2025. And we're also seeing in the market significant supply shortages, which is contributing to the increase in the price rise. And this is impacted through restrictions both in China as well as self-imposed restrictions in the US, which is resulting in a deficit of strategic critical mineral. So just moving forwards and quickly giving a company overview and snapshot for those that are following, be aware the ticker is VKA. We're also recently announced that we're trading on the OTC markets in the US under the ticker VKALF. Our share price today picked up to 1.4 cents. We had a good run earlier and a significant increase in the volume, and we're seeing some strong shareholder support. This puts our market cap north of $30 million. We just put out our quarterly, which demonstrates a very strong cash position, nearly 4.7 million, and gives us an EV of 26.9 million. On the board, it's myself, Dr. Julian Stevens, as well as a geologist, and Charles Thomas, who is our chairman, who is very well experienced in the resource sector and in the financial space. We do have a couple other projects which I'm not going to go through in this webinar, but for those that would like more information, please have a look at our website. There's a whole wealth of detail there, as well as historical releases. These are both located in Western Australia, which is the Riverina East high-grade gold project, and the Canegrass Battery Minerals project, which is a vanadium magnetite. So just moving on to set the scene a little bit of why tungsten, why now, and why Linka. Firstly, the US critical defense vulnerability. There's zero US domestic supply. They're 100% import dependent for a mineral which is essential to munitions, aerospace, and cutting tools. Tungsten is used across a whole wide range of things, but specifically in the current conflicts that are occurring globally, tungsten is being depleted at a rapid pace due to the use in munitions. And the critical aspect to this is that any tungsten that's used in munitions is not recoverable through the scrap channels, which in the more commercial environments are available for recycling. In the munition space, once it's used and it needs to be replaced. And there's been a lot of talk in NATO and the like about replenishing stockpiles, and the US is certainly looking to do this. They've even announced the establishment of strategic stockpiles at Hawthorne in Nevada, which is only a couple of 100 kilometers away from the Linka project. There's also the legislative mandate. The US Reshore Act bans Chinese tungsten from military supply chains from December 2026. And it isn't even just restricted to China, although that's the main impact due to their dominance in global supply, around 85%. But it also limits any supply chains incorporating tungsten from other jurisdictions, including Iran, Russia, and North Korea. I want to talk also about the perfect market timing. As I've mentioned, the price advantage, APT is trading at these near-time highs, just come down a little touch from a high only a week or so ago, about $3,150 per MTU of APT, which is a derivative product that's made out of tungsten concentrates and that's used for feeding into the likes of the munitions industry, as well as also the commercial industry. And we've seen a significant 3 times increase in the price of APT since the start of this year. Supply chain challenges, 85% of global supply controlled with China, and that's reaching into the structural supply chain deficit with stockpiles diminished as those supplies are consumed by those global conflicts, which I've talked about. And we see a huge opportunity with Linka with speed to market. We've got a brownfields advantage. This is a past producing mine that was operating in the 1950s. There's mineralization which is accessible at surface, which gives us the opportunity to define resources rapidly, and why we're also looking at moving forwards with the processing studies and establishing the metallurgical flow sheet in order to bring it forward as fast as possible. So this gives us the opportunity with high grade and low capex. The processing flow sheet is relatively straightforward. Again, I'll go through that in more detail shortly. But those high grades we have at surface, I mentioned the historical mining at 0.5%, but there's records from the historical mining stopes as high as 3% and drill hits up to 4.8%. So combined, these support our rapid start development strategy that we're looking to complete. So just giving us a quick overview of the projects, as I will keep mentioning, Linka is our primary focus, which is located broadly in the center of Nevada. But the other 5 projects which we have, bring us a total of 6, are also distributed around the state. We have 3 on the western side, Alpine, Ragged, and Long, as well as also close to the center of the state, Victory and Terrell. I want to draw the attendees the attention to these other projects that occur within the state. There's Guardian Metals, have a very large resource at Pilot Mountain, 12.5 million tons, at a much lower grade than Linka was previously mined, however, 0.27%. Blue Moon Metals, they have the Springer mine, which is located north of our Ragged, Long and Alpine projects, around comparable grade to what was mined at Linka, 0.5%. And then we have on the ASX, American Tungsten Antimony, which have Tennessee Mountain at 0.7 million tons at 0.3 to 0.5%. I should stress that that's not a JORC resource, neither is any of the resources at Blue Moon Metals. Only Guardian Metals has something that's qualified at the current reporting standards. All of these peer companies are trading at significant multiples to Viking's market cap. The lower being American Tungsten Antimony, around 100 million on the ASX. Guardian Metals trading significantly higher, that probably close to $700 million, but they're traded on the London Exchange. and Blue Moon Metals, I think north of $400 million Canadian. So that combined six assets that we have collectively a production history of over 100,000 tonnes at a very respectable grade of 0.54%. And I'll go on the next slide and just talk about what that grade means. Before we move there, we have a significant technical advantage at Linka. We've reported over the last couple of months a historical data set, which we were very fortunate to acquire, which is an extensive amount of drilling that was undertaken in the 1970s. And it saved in excess of 1 year of on-ground activity and well in excess of $1 million, probably closer to $2 million at the current costs of operating in the US. So collectively, this feeds into our rapid start strategy, advancing the Linka project via parallel technical work streams. And this means that we're moving both the permitting aspects, the metallurgical test work aspects, as well as the more technical geological aspects looking to define the resource. And this will allow us, bringing those work streams bringing those work streams forward together will allow us to bring this project forward with the development opportunity in the shortest possible time frame. So as I mentioned, where does Linka sit in terms of projects that are listed globally? Here's a snapshot of a suite of different projects. Again, take the opportunity after this webinar to look through and research those. But what I wanted to stress here is the grade that projects sit at. Linka, as I mentioned, historical mine grade across that project plus the others we have in our portfolio was in excess of 0.5%, which puts us in the top range of grades of projects for tungsten. There are many lower grade projects. A key company that the attendees will be aware of, maybe EQR. EQR now a very substantial market cap. They have two projects, one in Spain, Baracado, as well as Mount Carbine. These sit in much lower grades. What that means is we have the opportunity to reduce tonnages, which is what sits within our conceptual flow sheet, have a smaller tonnage, but which means we can have smaller infrastructure, lower capex, but we can use that higher grade and still produce a very respectable amount of concentrate in the conceptual study. So that's what we're working towards, looking at a small plant, but with higher grades, which means that we can yield comparable amounts of concentrates from peer companies that are operating on mines with much lower grades. So now I'll take time specifically to use the next few slides to talk about Linka, which is where the bulk of our activity has been undertaken. This slide shows a view over the Linka project and the three historical mines which were operating and feeding into the mill that was operating in the 1950s. The mill site is located here towards the centre of the picture in the historical tailings dam where we've undertaken some sampling. The mines which fed that mill were Conquest to the north on the left side of the picture, which is a pit and a shaft access from a couple of levels. We attained a very high-grade surface sample from here in our due diligence sampling, which returned 14.7% WO3. And it's this area that the historical records also illustrate a high-grade stope mined at 3%. There's the hillside shaft in the centre, an inclined shaft, again with some very, very substantial grades seen in the historical data set there. And then the Linka pit and shaft, which is the namesake for the project, that is located very close to the mill, which has the most substantial workings to 150 feet, around 45 metres, which is where the bulk of the feed came from in order to feed that mill. There's also a historical stockpile sitting at surface, running at about 0.8% from a metallurgical sample which we've collected, and we've currently embarked on a sampling program to take more samples from that area in order to get a better handle of the grade of the stockpile. And really importantly, the red arrow on the left here, this represents the mineralized trend that's at or near surface, which has been demonstrated from the historical exploration and the drilling. But as we move to the south, we go into this green arrow area, which is about a further 800 meters, doubling the strike length, to a surface sample, which where the older rocks come back to surface. Underneath here, at surface here, there is a volcanic blanket. This is unmineralized material, younger rocks, which is covering the mineralized trend. But we have high confidence that mineralization continues through this area because of this surface sample to the south, which yields 0.6% WO3. So that immediately expands the strike length to 1.6 kilometers. We also have, and a key point to take off this slide, is infrastructure advantages. This is a brownfield site. The main access road you can see here is only about 7 kilometers north to a bitumen highway, Highway 50 that transects Nevada, and it's only a couple hours from there to get to Tonopah and Fallon. Fallon is an area where there is a company called Kennametal, which has an APT refinery. They take scheelite concentrates and can turn that into APT. So we've got a close potential source to market. And to the west of this area, which is to the lower part of the image, there's a high voltage power line, 230 kVA transmission line, which gives us the opportunity for power for the sites should we want to tie into the grid. There's also reports of water, only about 50 or 60 meters below surface from the historical drilling records, which gives us potential for water that we would need for the project should it go ahead. So together, the infrastructure is very robust, access is very easy, climate is fine for working year round. We do get a bit of snow here, but not a great deal. This recent winter, the geophysics crew were working when there was a little bit of snow on the ground, but it melted fairly quickly. So a whole load of key advantages for Linka as a project for access and infrastructure, as well as high grades, which we've seen. Just quickly also want to mention that drilling data set that we acquired that's helping us fast track the project. There were 72 holes in that data set for close to 3,000 meters. All of that drilling is very shallow, deepest hole being about 125 meters, but the average depth of drilling was sub 50. So that really gives us the opportunity to be testing deeper below the known mineralized occurrences, as well as continuing to explore along the trend undercover. And that will feature as part of our maiden drilling program. So I'm just going to work from the north to the south, firstly starting with Conquest. This is the data set which we acquired, the historical data set and the historical drilling, with some very exceptional grades. So in the bullet points here, you can see 22.9 meters at 0.6%, 12.2 meters at 1.3%. These values are shown on the map on the right-hand side, and that drilling is located really at the eastern side of the area of mineralization. The takeaway from this slide is the contact between the orange-colored unit on the map and the brown. The orange is the intrusive, which brings the tungsten into the system. The brown is a limestone, which brings calcium into the system. Together, tungsten plus the calcium helps us make the scheelite. The formula for scheelite is CaWO4, so the calcium coming from the limestone and the tungsten from the intrusive. As we move to the left-hand side here, we've got this cross-section that's illustrated by this white dashed line on the map on the right, and we can see the location of this drilling with some of these very thick and substantial intercepts. Again, another example here, 10.7 meters at 0.6%. There's an area immediately adjacent to the shaft which hasn't seen any drilling, and this is where we took our surface sample from a shallow pit where we got 14.7% WO3, truly spectacular grades, as well as a second sample from the same location at 5.2%. So we can see an area immediately for testing just to the west of the drilling. But importantly, as we move south, this contact, the brown and the orange as we move south, has seen no drilling apart from 2 drill holes here, which didn't drill deep enough to test that contact position. So that leaves an open area remaining for testing. We also have the blue unit, which is another limestone, just a different part of the geological sequence. That dips to the north and intersects that contact at depth, and that hasn't been drilled either. And the blue unit is where the mineralization is hosted at Linka, which in the literature and the historical information is reported as a preferable contact, where given the magnitude of the grades we've seen at Conquest, we see opportunity for potentially even better mineralization conceptually, which we hope to test in the future. So moving south 800 meters from Conquest, we reach Linka, and in between there's hillside. I won't go into too much detail about that at the moment, but that whole contact between the 2 areas is prospective with surface expressions of mineralization. But really what I want to share from Linka is the extent of the historical workings. You can see here in this 3D model, this is a view to the west. We see a vertical shaft goes down about 50 meters, the workings where the stopes were drawn from and the ore that came out of the ground to feed the mill, which is underneath this pit that sits at surface. At surface, we have still remaining very high-grade samples in the historical data set. There's 8.5 meters at 1%. This was reinforced by a due diligence sampling where we sampled the zone and the ramp into the pit where we got about 7 meters at 0.5%. really supported that high-grade mineralization sits at surface. There's also a hole here, which LR11, don't have a call out, but the collar location is located where my mouse point is. And this is returned 7.9 meters at about 0.9%. There's also deeper holes that we have here, 9.8 meters at 0.5, just underneath the historical workings that shows the mineralization continues under the stope, as well as other holes to the in the image here, which show 9.1 meters at 0.3%, 7.6 at 0.4, and that shows that the system is continuing with depth. Now, the couple of deepest holes that were drilled at the project, which is LR03 here, as well as LR04, these two holes didn't reach the contact. They were restricted by the limitations of the equipment that was being used in the 1970s. They just didn't have enough air to get those rotary holes to depth. And so that prevented them from testing the contact. And this is an area where we see an opportunity and an area where we'll be undertaking drilling in our maiden drill program. There's also underneath the old workings to the northern side, this area in red, which has seen no drill holes, which we also look to be embarking on testing in this up and coming drill program. So there's a whole suite of opportunities that remain here at Linka. There's high-grade tungsten outcropping and available in the existing pit faces. There's at-surface mining opportunities to be targeted for grade control level drilling, which are exampled by those high-grade trench results that I've reported, as well as evaluating existing surface stockpiles, processing to generate concentrate sample for offtake assessment. What this means is we believe there's sufficient material in the stockpile and at a sufficient grade, which we're confirming with our current sampling, that we may be able to look to toll treat that once we've established the flow sheet and completed the metallurgical test work, which will allow us to generate several tons of scheelite concentrate, which we can then look to give to a variety of off-takers to assess and potentially lead into future agreements with them. There's also the tailings dam. We completed recently auger drilling program, sorry, not auger drilling, auger sampling program through that stockpile, which we're going to use that information to determine the volumes and then also get the grades. And then subsequent to getting the grades through the assay, we've collected additional material which we can look to embark on some metallurgical test work with to assess the opportunity within the tailings dam. Now, just stepping out and looking at the scale of the opportunity, and this is really key important to share through this webinar. The map on the right-hand side shows Conquest and Linka, and this is the surface expression in the area that was extensive mining, which is about 800 meters long. At the start of the presentation, I referred to the surface sample in the southwest, 0.6%. That sits under this green unit, which is that volcanic cover, which is not mineralized, which overlays the historical, or so the older mineralized rocks, and believe that extends the mineralized target horizon to 1.6 kilometers. If we just move to the map on the left-hand side, this red arrow represents that 1.6 kilometers. The background image is the magnetic geophysics which we completed, and we believe from that geophysics that we've potentially identified the limits of the intrusion, which is the orange rocks on the map on the right, which is a large intrusion which has a circumference of about 7 kilometers. So that really means that there's a large portion of that intrusion that has not seen any drill testing, and there's a lot of opportunity for further drilling, further evaluation to see what sits underneath cover, which really expands the blue sky potential outside of the existing mining footprint. So we're targeting the contact zone, and again, our maiden drilling program seeks to put some initial exploratory holes just to test through the younger cover, which is overlaying the intrusion, just to confirm what the rock types are underneath. And once we've confirmed the rock types, if we hit limestone, we know that we're in the rocks. We have to find the contact of the intrusion. If we hit an intrusion, we look to narrow down that search space between the two holes and then be able to identify where the contact is for subsequent follow-up testing. So that gives us a multi-kilometer horizon with the potential to host undiscovered mineralization. Now I'd like to just move into the metallurgical test work, which is a key component of the work that we've been undertaking over the last couple of months. So those samples which we collected during our due diligence work, one of them is termed LK Met 0004, The picture at the top here is of that sample before we crushed it and ground it for the met test work, and it's shown under a black light. Scheelite has a very unique characteristic, which means under a UV light that it fluoresces, and that's why in this image we can see all of these bright coloured speckles and zones of mineralization. So this is the scheelite that is fluorescing. There are other minerals that fluoresce here, such as calcite, but there's fortunately not very much of it. Calcite is can be a problematic mineral within the flotation, and we're really pleased to identify in the mineralogical test work that we've done that we've established there is a very small amount of calcite, and the majority of the other minerals outside of the scheelite is garnet, reporting about 60%. Now, this is the sample that we then subsequently crushed and ground, and then we put initially through a gravity separation method, which is the first step. The second step is flotation. We're targeting through the metallurgical test work, we're targeting a grade of a concentrate greater than 50%. This is significant because 50% is really above that, the limit that we need to achieve in order to be able to have a marketable product, and we're targeting more than 70% recovery. The gravity separation proved extremely effective. The lower image here shows the sample going through gravity separation test work on a Wilkie table. This white material here is the scheelite, which is concentrated, and the waste material is the gangue, is the browner color, which is the garnet. And we attained in this sample a premium scheelite concentrate grade of 63.6%. In that process, we recovered a total of about 46% of the contained scheelite into a concentrate grade of 56.4%, so still above that target of 50%. The tail from the gravity then moves on to the flotation test work. The flotation step is to recover further material, and our initial rougher flotation step recovered a further 37.8%, giving us a total recovery of scheelite of 83.8%. We do need to continue taking that rougher flotation product and putting it through cleaner flotation stages, and that test work is currently underway at the lab. So we're expecting to be getting results from that in the near future. There has been a bit of backlog of work at the lab, which has delayed some of us receiving the results, but that test work is underway, and we hope it won't be too long till we get those final outputs and be able to report those to market. The objective, as I said, is to have a combined recovery grading greater than 70%, targeting a scheelite concentrate grade greater than 50%, and we're seeing very positive indicators through our work today that could be attainable. This then leads into a modular strategy, which allows us to evaluate the utilization of low capex modular processing units, which I'll go into more detail now on the next slide. So Mineral Technologies is a company which we've engaged to do our concept processing study. Mineral Technologies are headquartered in Brisbane, but they operate globally. They've got a laboratory in Florida, which we're currently speaking to look at doing some additional test work on some larger samples. And they have a Flex Series technology which reduces lead times and simplifies the on-site construction. What this really means is that they construct and build the processing equipment off-site in modular blocks that then get shipped to site and essentially gets assembled there pretty much like a Lego kit. So it means that you can put these site projects together, put this processing equipment together in a very rapid fashion with effectively low time on site, and it's really just a case of bolting the pieces together. So we have provided Mineral Technologies with all our metallurgical test work data. We have weekly calls with them to update them with improvements or additional information which we've required. And through this study, they're going to give us a series of deliverables. So one of them is the process flow diagram, which I have shown on this slide here on the right, and there's more detail in the announcement we put out a week or so ago, which illustrates the flow sheet. Just very quickly, we take mineralized material, it gets run through a crushing process, a grinding process, and once it's been ground through a ball mill, it then feeds through a gravity separation circuit using a series of spirals, cleaning stages, and then the tails from this runs through a flotation circuit. There's also some recycling of material to ensure the maximum recoveries are attained. The flotation step then again goes through a rougher flotation with the tail going back through the gravity, and then also the concentrate produced from that goes through a cleaner step, which then allows us to upgrade the material to produce the final products, which are combined with the gravity concentrates. So it's a simple flow sheet. In addition to the flow sheet that we get from Mineral Technologies, we get mass and water balances, which will feed into our ongoing steps in the studies. And as well, very critically, we get a CapEx estimate, including an equipment listing. They'll also provide us with the OpEx inputs, which will give us an idea of the operational costs. And then they'll bring all this together and give us a 3D design model, as well as construction timeline estimates. So we're about halfway through this study at the moment with Mineral Technologies, and we expect over the coming months to complete this initial desktop conceptual study, at which point we'll look to provide more information to market. So strong news flow coming throughout from this front. The conceptual processing rate we've employed here is 43 tonnes per hour. You can do the maths on that, whether it's operated at 24/7 or whether it's operated 5 days a week, daytime hours. That gives us flexibility at throughput rates that we can look for the project. And essentially that gives us the opportunity to establish what volumes of concentrate that we could produce. So I encourage anyone who's on the webinar or watching this, that you can sit there with these numbers and you can do the maths and look at what sort of range of throughputs we could achieve. And with the historical mine grades and the historical recoveries, we can pull out a conceptual idea of production that we could envisage from this project. I will stress this is all conceptual studies at the moment, but we are moving this forward in parallel with the technical work that we're doing, expecting that we get success in the technical streams. Will then allow us to take this forward and look to move it forward through to the next levels of study, which would then ultimately move forward into the likes of PFS, etc. So I just want to wrap up a lot of the activities that we've been doing and the forward news flow. So firstly, acquisition and funding, so that we cemented acquiring this project back in December. And in that 5 months or so, we've been extremely active. We raised a good chunk of funds for that, and we currently have a cash at bank of about 4.7 million, which is a very strong cash position, which is going to fund all the activity that we see below. There's no need for undertaking a raise at this stage. We can fully fund the drilling programs that we have planned. And as part of that raise, we also saw a strategic cornerstone investment from American Tungsten, who are listed on the CSE, who have a project in Idaho. They've been very valuable in providing us contacts, which we're utilising for the metallurgical test work that we're doing, for the field activities we're doing, as well as giving us key indications of ways which we can operate efficiently and effectively in the US. Exploration and data integration. So we've had those high-grade assays from the field sampling that I talked about in the due diligence work. We've digitised the historical data, collected that into the numbers that I've presented earlier on in this slide deck, and we undertook the geophysics. The geophysics has given us this expanded blue sky potential along that large intrusive contact that we believe we've identified in the ground magnetics, and that really has opened up the scale and opportunity for the project. The metallurgy and processing achieved that excellent outcome, 53-fold grade increase from the feed sample, producing that 63.6% concentrate in the gravity separation, and Mineral Technologies are advancing that concept study forwards. And then the permitting pathway. So assuming that we're going to achieve success through all of our activities, we wanted to ensure that we are collecting all the data requirements which will allow us to move forwards into the permitting steps should we look to seek to build a mine here. And WSP, a global consultancy firm, have been very effective in ensuring that we kick off those studies and those baseline data collections. So that work is ongoing. And all of this is aligned with our faster market development strategy in parallel with or supporting government initiatives such as the Reshore Act. And it will move into the maiden drilling, which is scheduled to commence in the June quarter. So what this looks like in a timeline, well, the ongoing metallurgical results coming throughout the month of May. We've got additional processing steps that we're looking at involving TOMRA, which is ore sorting, and SEPRO, which are centrifugal separators. These could be bolt-on parts to that flow sheet I went through before, and they could fit into that work stream if they seek to enhance the recoveries. There are other steps that we're also looking at, which have been suggested by Mineral Technologies, such as WIMS, which is a high-intensity magnetic separation. There could be an opportunity to remove some of the garnet from the feed material here using that methodology, and that's some of the work that we're speaking to Mineral Technologies about and looking to commence. The concept processing study will run in parallel with all that activity on the metallurgy, and we expect to have that again completed throughout May and reported through into June. Further geological field activity, so this is supporting tailing sampling we've done, the stockpile sampling that we completed, we envisage getting out there in May to undertake some additional surface mapping as well as trench sampling, looking to verify and confirm the location and mineralization of surface, which will then feed into ongoing drilling program planning. For the purpose of the maiden drill program, we're in the process of the notice of intent, which is the federal approvals in order to be able to get permission to drill on the ground. We're currently speaking to the Bureau of Land Management regarding our notice of intent. We hope to be able to report soon advances that we're making in that space. And in parallel, looking to secure a drill contract. Again, we've been speaking with a number of drill contractors, well advanced in those discussions, and looking to secure a rig to be coming to site later in June, which will then see us putting a drill program running through into July, potentially through to August. Assay results will be staggered. Outside of that, once we've collected the drilling samples, we get them to the lab, and we envisage about an 8-week turnaround there in the US at the moment. So we should see drilling results starting to trickle through from August and carrying us through the subsequent months. As I mentioned, in parallel baseline studies, this is just ongoing data collection and work that we need to be doing in order to collect the required information to be able to move this project to a permitting pathway on the basis of success of all the other activity that I've just mentioned. Another step that we've been conducting outside of or within our corporate activities is a DIBC membership. This is the Defence Industry Base Consortium. This is a US-based body that has a whole heap of companies that can potentially provide inputs within the defence industry. It's not just limited to mining, resources or critical minerals. It covers a whole swath of different industries, but it is very relevant to tungsten given its importance within the defence sector. So with that membership, we expect to be able to be exposed to requests from the US Department of War through the Pentagon for potential feedstocks that could meet those stockpiling requirements that they need for tungsten, and can then also open the door to access to other initiatives within the US, such as FAST-41, which we've already been looking at and considering for where that's applicable for this project. As well as DPA Title III, which gives us potential funding pathways. So that is another string to our bow that we hope will give us exposure to the US and the market for tungsten. So that's the presentation wrapped up. I look forward to receiving some questions. Again, please take the time to have a look at this presentation, and I'm very grateful that you joined us for the webinar today. Gigi.
Thank you. Maybe it might help to answer some of the questions if you have the prezzo up, or if you want to refer to it, Julian. But I thought, so one of the first questions was, assuming it's economic and funded, so you've got the resource, you've got the money, what would it take to turn your site into an operating mine?
Yeah, look, we've been needing to follow the study pathways, which happen with all resource projects, but we're moving very rapidly and bringing a lot of those study aspects forward early on, as I've mentioned throughout these slides. So critically, it's get the drilling done, define the resource, get the metallurgy resolved, which we're on with both of those steps, get the flow sheet defined. CapEx is going to be a really key aspect that we look to get out of this study. So that will determine potential different funding pathways for the project, depending on the magnitude of that capital. And we're pretty optimistic, given the size of the plants that we're putting through the concept study, that the capital cost should not be too significant. And then it's a case of getting into the permitting aspects. And this involves engaging with the federal government, the relevant land management agencies there, and then putting together a plan of operations for the project. And within that plan of operations, we have to have the relevant data that we need in order to fulfill that application. And that's all those baseline studies that we're commencing with. So completing the workflows that we've got currently engaged will allow us to move that pathway forwards to looking at bringing the project into development, should we be successful with all the steps on the way.
Excellent. And probably linking in with that quite nicely, are there current ongoing discussions around non-dilutive capital?
We are speaking with and investigating a number of different opportunities for potential non-dilutive capital. There are many different pathways. So there's government pathways that we can follow, both at the state and the federal level. So there are a number of capital investment initiatives within Nevada which this project would qualify for, which we are investigating once we get that resource identified and the process flow sheet determined. There's also DPA Title III, which I mentioned. So an example there is Guardian Metal Resources. They received $6 million US in funding for advancing a pre-feasibility study for their Pilot Mountain project. That was granted last year. So that through that DPA Title III pathway. And then there's speaking with potential off-takers. Off-takers are happy to forward sell contracts, and there are opportunities. So that's where it comes into bringing in the stockpile, completing the metallurgical test work, taking that stockpile, looking at processing it, producing a concentrate, which we can then go to off-takers and seek potential funding, additional funding pathways that way. So yes, there are a number of potential avenues that we can follow in order to get non-dilutive capital to help bring this project forward. And we are having conversations in all those right areas to seek to achieve that.
I probably note that you've got quite a strong cash position, and you've been quite economic on the burn considering how much work you've done. So, I thought that's quite impressive. The other one I've got is, what is the purpose of the tailings dam sampling you have recently completed?
Yes, that's a good question. So the tailings dam you can see just on the right-hand side of this image. It's this flat area, and in fact, if I just move forwards a couple of slides, you can see it even better here. So here's the old mill site. Here's the tailings dam, which is this area in the foreground. We've taken gridded samples across this area on a 20 by 40 meter spacing, and the purpose of those samples are twofold. One, when we took the samples, we wanted to establish the thickness of the tailings dam, so we can take the surface area that we measure, take that thickness, and we can get a volume, so we can determine how much volumetrically material is there. We can then apply a density, which will give us a tonnage. And when we receive all the assay results, we'll get an idea of the grade. Our thinking at the moment, and this is speculative, but we know from the historical mining records, materials mined at a reported head grade of about 0.54%. That 0.45%, if you applied 70% recovery to that, that should leave around sort of the 0.2% in the ground. As I noted on one of my previous slides, there's mines operating globally with head grades of 0.2. So the opportunity could be there that there'd be additional recoverable material from the tailings dam. So once we've got those assays, we can then look to produce a composite sample for metallurgical test work. And this could provide a low cost, very low cost feed to supplement the process facility, to complement additional mineralization that's mined at surface, and reprocess that through. It will help commission the plant, as well as it would look to recover some additional material, which would generate additional cash flows. You would literally just need to come in here with some small trucks and a loader and dig the material up. It's already been ground. It shouldn't need regrinding. You can look to put that through the gravity circuit, the flotation circuit, recover material, and then depending on the grind size, as we do the assessments of the material samples we've taken, you could potentially regrind that and look to extract more material. So the key objective here is to ascertain what the value is of this material at current tungsten prices. That could be very rewarding.
And what do you need to do before you can start drilling in June or this quarter?
Yes, so the drilling is dependent on us finalising getting that first and foremost the permit from the BLM. As I said, we're speaking to them, had a call with them just earlier this week, and we're finalising those steps. So we hope to be able to update the market shortly on the progress of that notice of intent submission. And that will, once we've received that, we've got the go-ahead to be able to go and set up the drill pads, which just requires us getting an earthworks contractor. We've actually had a geologist out here recently who's been and inspected the proposed drill site locations, putting marks on the ground. So once we get that earthworks contractor in there, then we just need to get the drill rig. And as I said, we're quite advanced in terms of speaking to drill contractors who can come and do this work. It's a case of locking them in and getting them to come out and do the drilling. So we don't have too many steps that we need to follow to get the drilling underway. It's just a case of completing the permitting and getting the drill rig secured. And we're working towards that occurring in this quarter, should be sometime in June. There may be some reasons that it might push out slightly, but I'm confident that we should be able to get there towards the back end of this quarter.
Are there currently any operational tungsten mines in the US?
No, is a short answer. There's a number of projects that are more advanced, and there's projects that are talking about coming forwards, but at this stage there are no feeds for tungsten to meet the domestic supply requirements in the US. They're 100% reliant on imports, and that's why we've got our faster market strategy, that we see the big opportunities being an early mover and getting into production as soon as possible.
Excellent. Well, I don't have any further questions unless, and if someone did want to send them through, please do send them to the central mailbox. But a reminder as well that Julian's going to be in Sydney next week for the RIU conference. So if you're here and want to catch up with him, please reach out.
Yes, I'll add to that. Please come by. RIU is a great conference. We'll have a booth there. We'll have some of the rocks and the samples. Perfect opportunity for any investors who are currently on the register who want more information. It'd be great to meet you. And likewise, any people who are thinking about investing that would like to know more information, please stop by the booth. My talk is at 5:05 p.m. on the Tuesday. I'll be giving a similar presentation, maybe be a bit more details if there's any more announcements out prior to then. But yes, look forward to seeing any people there. And if you get in quick, yeah, we might have some merch that we can share around as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.